I just sometimes feel like it's all ruined.
Just fucking say it!
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother!
You didn't kill her, Annie. What? She isn't gone.
And I realize I am to blame.
Mommy?
There are few tasks in this world that are as thankless as the task of being a parent, specifically and particularly for mothers. Society appears to have a very ambivalent attitude towards our mothers where, on one hand, she is often deified into an ethereal being who can do no wrong, and any criticism towards her, no matter how minuscule or valid, is automatically deemed blasphemous. On the other hand, there is the other side that views our mother's nurturing instincts as the sole factor that make or break a child. Take, for example, the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin. After her son murdered a number of his classmates, the town shuns and harasses his mother, designating her into the role of social pariah and nothing less than a demon to be exorcised. Never mind the fact that she too is in mourning, as that very son also murdered her husband and her other child, a little girl. We can see the same imbalance of vitriol when we compare critiques of single mothers with critiques of the deadbeats who create them. Should that mother raise anything less than a perfect angel, she is automatically deemed a failure, with the man who turned her into a single mother not receiving anywhere near the same amount of scrutiny and judgment. Of course, mothers aren't perfect, and there is a role they play in the dysfunction of their children, but society tends to completely disregard the fact that children need their fathers just as much as their mothers. That father's absence plays an equal role in shaping the child, though the dysfunction may manifest itself in a different way. All this dysfunction ends up harboring itself in the person in a wound known as childhood trauma, which can only be healed through the process of shadow work. For those of you who don't know, shadow work is the process of looking back on the traumatic events in our lives, continuously opening the nesting dolls of discord until we eventually get to the root and have a sort of aha moment that helps us understand who we are and why we've made certain decisions in our lives. The process of shadow work involves us looking at these darker pieces of our soul and integrating them within ourselves so that we can truly be whole. Remember that life is about balance. You cannot have good without the bad. There is no order without chaos. There's nothing inherently wrong with these darker emotions. What matters is how we respond to them and use them to affect ourselves, directly or indirectly. These traumatic events happened, but there's nothing we can do to change the past. It's imperative we accept things for how they happened and try to find the lesson or lessons in these events. Failure and experience are the best teachers because they tell us what doesn't work. Success is the reward for a job well done. I know this is easier said than done, and I promise I'm not just saying that. Most of what I talk about on this channel comes from my own experiences. Shadow work is a continuous process. Every day is a chance to learn something new about yourself, and from the work that I've done, I now truly recognize and believe that everything happens for a reason. I have learned to heal myself so that I would be better prepared to step into my life purpose as a healer and be a guiding light for all of you. Today's analysis is going to be delving into the movie Hereditary. Now let's welcome Mr. Astor back to the channel. This movie was the first official catalyst for my motivations to create a YouTube channel, and like Midsummer, it has been instrumental in helping me shape my mindset and views of the world. Hereditary, like Midsummer, is a horror film that will be hard to watch and even revisit. Not just because of the graphic imagery, but also because these films will likely speak to your subconscious/shadow self, the same way they did for me. There is also a deeper symbolism and esotericism to the film that relates to the natural/spiritual laws of this dimension. Hereditary is ultimately a cautionary tale of how generational curses are created and continued, and how imperative it is for us to do our own respective shadow work. I would recommend you watch the movie first so you can develop your own opinions first, then come back and watch this review so I can explain some things you didn't understand, or even help you come to a deeper understanding to shape your own perspective. Now let's get into the analysis.
I have a lot of resistance to things like this.
You know, I was a tomboy when I was growing up. I hated dresses and dolls and pink.
Jesus Christ, Annie. You're not planning on letting him see that, are you?
No.
Peter. What do you think he's going to feel when he sees that?
What? It's not about him.
I never wanted to be your mother.
The biggest takeaway from this film, for me, was the importance of women nourishing their femininity, and the main characters, Annie and her son Peter, each serve to demonstrate the ways this lack of nourishment, and even disrespect for this powerful principle, sow dysfunction. Annie herself is a very unfeminine woman, and this is a direct result of the mother wounds caused by her childhood trauma. She admitted to her own daughter that she didn't relate to any of the stereotypical facets of femininity. By her own admission, she was a tomboy. This lack of femininity translates into her being a cold mother, especially and specifically for Peter. She admitted herself that she never wanted to be or rather, his mother, and Peter feels this, ultimately causing him to be subliminally afraid of women, which we can see with his lack of confidence in the awkward interactions with the young lady he has a crush on. Hey, you know what? She looks a little familiar. I can't put my finger on it. Motherhood and femininity go hand in hand. That's not to say that if you don't want children, you're not a feminine woman. No. What I'm referring to are the nurturing instincts associated with motherhood. You see, creation is simply another process of mothering something. We have an idea, a metaphorical child, and then we enact certain steps to see that idea to fruition. AKA, we are nurturing that project to its completion, the same way a mother nurtures her child as it grows, in the womb and on the 3D plane. This anti-femininity is also reflected in her artwork. There isn't much, or honestly any, creativity to the pieces. Her works are very meticulous, real, and logical. Even the artworks of her own life are extremely stoic. They don't offer any commentary or emotion on the memories. They just are what they are.
It's a neutral view of the accident.
I also feel that this objective perspective she has taken in creating her art is symbolic of her disassociation from the trauma of her childhood, aka the need for her to integrate her shadow. She has completely cut off that aspect of herself, repressing it and distancing it because she was so afraid of repeating her mother's mistakes. But in doing so, she actually created a self-fulfilling prophecy that saw her doing exactly what her mother did. I have a first-hand experience with this. There was a point in time where I was going through less than desirable situations in life, specifically a toxic relationship and then working in a strip club, and I estranged myself from my family. I told myself I didn't want them, specifically and especially my mother, to see me going through what I was going through. That, oh, once I get back on my feet, once my life is perfect, once I'm perfect, then I'll invite them back in. While there was some truth to the shame I was feeling, which in actuality was the guilt of not listening to my intuition, what I was really doing was running from the trauma and avoiding true healing. There came this horrific realization in my most toxic relationship where I was reminiscing on my parents and began to empathize with my mother on a deeper level, eventually leading me to see that I empathized because I was becoming her through repeating her same mistakes. Then another one came when my sister was coming to visit for the first time in years. I was dealing with the confusion caused by cognitive dissonance where I knew I missed my sister, knew I wanted to see her, yet as her arrival date neared, I could feel myself having a panic attack and desired to cancel her visit altogether. For me, her visit was triggering the old wounds of our childhood, wounds I had lied about and convinced myself weren't there. Wounds that would prove I wasn't the well-adjusted, happy human being I was pretending to be. The support group scene is a forewarning of the destruction to come should she continue to run from the shadows. She mentions that she feels she is blamed, but she doesn't know what for. In my eyes, this is her intuition speaking out, trying to get her to see not even that she is the sole proprietor of the blame, but simply that she has some and needs to take accountability for the role she is playing. The scene is also further emphasis of her disassociation. As she stated, she has a lot of resistance to, quote, stuff like this, and she was, quote, forced to come when she tried it previously, all indicating that she is uncomfortable navigating her shadows and showing a disconnect with her own emotions, a direct result of her fragmented relationship with her mother. She didn't have a mother figure who consoled her, who demonstrated what it means to nurture something, and assured her that being emotional is normal, i.e., when our mothers console us when we cry. Thus, she is unable to nurture herself and, by proxy, her own children. Also, consider the irony in referring to these group therapy sessions as going to the movies. Yet another allusion to taking a distant, impersonal perspective of a situation. Because she didn't have a father figure, or apparently any masculine figure in her life, she subconsciously took this role on for herself, now operating in her masculine. Because she doesn't have any positive examples of masculinity, she also doesn't know or relate to the principle of safety and security, another explanation for her lack of femininity. I mentioned in my previous video that if a man wants a traditionally feminine woman, then he has to cultivate the environment for her. Ergo, in order for a woman to rest in femininity, specifically around men, she has to trust those men in her life to fulfill the responsibility of masculinity. We can see this distrust play out directly in her relationship with her husband. When she discovers Charlie's body and her husband consoles her, we interestingly don't see her clinging to him. He offers her comfort, but she doesn't actually acknowledge these feelings of love by actually using his shoulder to cry on. And so he simply clings to her, silently reminding her that he is there for her. Then, as the movie progresses, Annie has made a habit of leaving Steve, choosing to sleep outside in the treehouse. Again, at her most vulnerable, during her explosive display of emotion, and now, during sleep, she does not trust Steve to keep her safe. Her most obvious display of mistrust towards male figures is in her interactions and relationship with her son. I'll say that in the beginning of the movie, her attitude seems to come more from a lack of femininity. She's very snarky, passive-aggressive, and sarcastic towards Peter, and while she is still wary of him, displayed by her questioning him about alcohol despite his insistence he doesn't drink, she still trusts him enough to let him leave the house with his baby sister. Though I'd say it's a subliminal trust because her motivations for having him bring Charlie are ultimately more about her not trusting his word.
She's going with you.
Great.
Now this really means no drinking.
Yeah, I really wasn't going to.
Of course, this small amount of trust is obliterated with the death of Charlie. She even admits to her animosity towards her son when she discusses her daughter's death with Joan.
My daughter was killed.
Killed. Her use of that word implies that, in her head, Charlie's death was the result of a deliberate action, as opposed to a very unfortunate and tragic accident. And she sort of admits to this animosity again at the dinner table.
You did what you did.
I will say that in analyzing Annie's face when she's speaking with Joan, part of her looks horrified at her admission, but I also sense a bit of confusion, as if she's saying, where did that come from? So I feel like this scene could even be interpreted as her intuitively knowing that there is a more sinister explanation and cause behind her daughter's death. The movie alludes to Peter being aware of this mistrust with the nightmare when he directly asks her, "Why are you afraid of me?" The conversation itself isn't inherently bad. I honestly feel like this would have been beneficial for them to have because it is such a vulnerable, personal thing for Annie to admit. Unfortunately, it is Annie's initial tone in presenting this feeling to Peter and the lead up to her admission that makes me feel that she said this because she knew it would sting. When confronted with the question, she doesn't even answer it. Instead, her body language and tone change to an aura of incredulous defensiveness, and she responds with a very blunt and quite damaging rebuttal.
I never wanted to be your mother.
At the same time, I feel like this scene is another confirmation that Annie is intuiting a present danger. She proclaims herself a medium, a title that alludes to psychic powers, which comes with the ability to sense things that aren't always obvious, easily explainable, or even easily understood. This explains how she was able to piece the cult plans together, and her subconscious effort to sacrifice herself and her children so many years ago. In the nightmare, she says she was trying to save Peter, but that then begs the question, save him from what? The answer is, of course, the cult. The reason the cult is going after Peter is specifically because of Annie, more specifically because of Annie's mother. So, in taking out her children and herself, she would have been breaking the curse because she knows it is, in a way, her fault that they are in danger. She brought them into this world despite knowing she wasn't ready to have children, and she allowed her mother into their lives despite knowing she wasn't a good influence. It wasn't Annie who finally cut her mother off. She said it was her husband who took initiative to force the no contact rule. And then there are all the deliberate actions taken by Annie that led to this moment.
Can you get up, sweetheart? We're gonna try something.
I was having a nightmare.
Oh, it's okay. We can do something.
I saw Charlie in the corner and then you started trying to pull my head off.
Peter, I would never do that to you. Are you crazy? What corner did you see Charlie? Hello?
Guess who just called me from school in complete hysterics?
Charlie?
What?
She wasn't concerned at all with Peter until it was too late. The movie does show her initiate shadow work in the very beginning, with her going to the support group to talk about her feelings, and when she starts going through her mother's things. Had she continued on through the box, literally and figuratively unpacking who her mother truly is, she would have recognized Joan and known not to trust her. At the same time, a part of me does think she had to go through all the events because she may not have taken the occult and spirituality books seriously, thus not enabling her to fully comprehend the danger she and her family were in. Remember, when Joan first mentioned the seance, Annie was very skeptical until she saw and experienced it firsthand. I also feel that Annie's reaction to the seance is very telling. She isn't relieved or happy for Joan seemingly reuniting with her grandson and getting peace. Annie is completely spooked and uneasy. Annie's willingness to trust Joan is another example of how her mommy issues have negatively affected her. When Joan introduces herself, Annie is extremely wary and tries to pull away. It is Joan's revelation of the loss of her child and grandchild, and thus indirectly admitting that she too is a mother, that gets Annie to let her guard down. Since this is an Ari Aster film, and since we know how cruelly calculating the cult is, I don't think Joan was chosen simply for her motherly aura. Since she actually knows Annie's mother, I feel like there is a sort of spiritual link that speaks to the little girl in Annie. The connection isn't just strong because of Joan's own maternal aura, it's strong because there is a personal link to Annie's own mother.